Councillors, if we could please start the meeting. Good evening all. I'm Councillor Wilby. I'm the Chairman of the Planning Committee and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. I take this opportunity to advise you that if there is a fire alarm, and it does sound, please remain seated and the members of the Democratic Service Team will assess the situation and give further instruction on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the council. If anyone else intends to record these proceedings, can you please let me know? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that the members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Is there anyone intending to record? Nope. Okay. I would also like to advise members that they should only address the meeting by way of the microphone, and I remind you to turn the microphone off when they're finished speaking. Okay, moving on. Item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? No, all good. So that takes care of item 2. There are no substitute members. Okay. Are there any visiting members? Would you like to come forward to go through what you wish to speak on?
I'd like to speak on item 15, please. Claire Keeley.
Councillor Parfitt, read item 15, please.
Councillor Nagy, item 17. Councillor Clark, items 15 and 13.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I also believe we've got Councillor Sams joining us by Teams and Councillor Stan Forecast as well.
Yes, Councillor Janetta Sams speaking on item 18. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Stan Forecast.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, councillors, I believe we've got everyone back. Okay, moving on then. Item 7, disclosures by members and officers. Is there any disclosures? Councillor?
Yes, item 13, I've been involved as the Hunton Parish Council and as the Parish Flood Warden. So I intend to make a comment, but then withdraw from the meeting for that item and not be involved in the voting.
Thank you, councillor. Anyone else?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a member of Staplehurst Parish Council, but I don't sit on the planning committee. So I plan to speak and vote on items 14 and 19. I would like to exclude myself from item 15 due to a family interest in it. So I won't speak or vote on that matter.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Anyone else? Any officers? Okay, moving on then. Disclosures of lobbying. Okay, what I will do, I'll go around the actual room rather than actually ask individually. So,
Thank you, Chairman. I've been lobbied on items 13, 14, 17 and 19.
Items 13 and 15. I've been away, not had a chance to catch up, so I may have been lobbied, but as far as I'm concerned, no.
13, 15 and 17, Chair.
Sorry, 15, 13. Sorry, I can. 14, 19, 16 and 17.
thank you,
Should
councillor.
have just said what I haven't been lobbied on.
I've been lobbied on item 13, 15 and 17.
I'm only aware of having been lobbied on item 15. I may have had emails, but
item 15 and 17.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been lobbied on items 15, 17 and 18.
I've been lobbied on 13, 15, 17 and 18.
I've been lobbied on 13, 15, 16, 17 and 18.
Yeah, I've been lobbied on 13, 15, 17 and 18.
And I've been lobbied. It's easy to say all. Right. Okay, thank you, councillors. Okay, moving on then. Item 9. So I move that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, councillors. Item 10, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of May 2024. I move that these minutes of the meeting be approved of the correct record and signed. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Do we have any item 11? Do we have any petitions to be presented? No. No. Be presented. Any deferred items? I call upon the Officer Rob Jarman, the Development and Management, to provide an update on any deferred items.
Thanks, Chairman. We're negotiating on all of the deferred items, but just to bring to your attention, a meeting date has been fixed now next month for the council application at the former Royal Mail sorting office. So should all have a date in your diary.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Right, moving on then. So move on to the application, Greenstone Place, Heathridge Road.
Yeah, I'll check.
Okay, so I move to the officer to introduce. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and good evening all. Realise there's an important football match for all English fans tonight. Yeah, I'm just going to give a quick sort of strategic introduction. So I'm going to cover hopefully the main points here. And the case officer, Marion Geary, is going to go into more detail. But first of all, the National Planning Policy Framework clearly sets out that local planning authorities should assess and deliver on the need for what's called specialist accommodation. So obviously care accommodation, accommodation for the elderly, basically what is proposed today. So hold that thought. This is not an allocation in the local plan review. However, there are no allocations for this type of accommodation. So back to first principles, section 38 in brackets 6 of the Act says that planning decisions should be made in accordance with the development plan. So that's the recently adopted Maidstone local plan review. However, it also says, unless there are material considerations to indicate otherwise. And as been set out in the report, there's a clear present need for care accommodation and elderly accommodation and the other forms of accommodation. But we quantify the need for care accommodation. So there's a current significant deficit. We're not meeting the need. That has been recently commented upon by an inspector at a fairly recent appeal for a care home at Sutton Valence, just outside Sutton Valence. So we as planning officers are weighing that very heavily, that there's a need which is not being met. And sorry to be blunt about it, even if a care home was permitted tonight, it's going to take 3 to 5 years before it's actually built and it's occupied. So we weighed that very heavily. Secondly, it is in the open countryside, but because we don't allocate sites, it's highly likely that it is going to be in the open countryside. So we've looked at in great detail at impact on the open countryside. In terms of the care home, that will be clearly visible from Heath Road. However, if one is familiar with Heath Road, and you can see on the location plan on your committee reports, to my mind, there's a clear ribbon of development along that southern side of Heath Road, and this is what I would regard as an infill. Secondly, due to the scale of it, the various elements, and there's 4 elements to this, they will be visible. We're not saying that a development of this scale would be invisible. However, the visual impact is reduced, particularly from the public right-of-way to the south, which is the Greensand Ridge Walk. It's by the topography, the brow of the hill. The setback of the care elements. As members will be aware, it's single story that's proposed by far in the main. Those familiar with Vanity Lane will be aware of the quite robust screening along Vanity Lane. People will be familiar with Linton Hill in that it's sort of, the carriageway itself is lower than the land adjacent. And last but not least, what is proposed to the south, where one gains views from the public right of way, is a 50 to 60 metre depth of native planting. So although there will be some visual impact, we think that it is reasonably well mitigated. I think the applicant has probably done the best they can in terms of mitigating that impact, that visual impact. You know, clearly, and Marion will talk in more detail about this, and it's clearly set out in the committee report, there is an impact on residential amenity, particularly the family who live next door to this. As locations go, we think this is a relatively sustainable location. As villages go, Coxheath has got a number of amenities. There's a relatively good bus service to Maidstone Town Centre and other places. And last but not least, we think that there are genuine benefits with this scheme. I think the hospice that is proposed speaks for itself. On to more detailed matters, I think this part of Heath Road needs a controlled crossing because there's a doctor's surgery next door, but a controlled crossing in the form of a zebra crossing is proposed with the associated 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. And last but not least, we're very conscious of the fact that Linton Crossroads, as I think we all know, is over its design capacity and has been for some time. And we have sought, and the applicant has agreed to a proportional contribution to the improvement of Linton Crossroads. So this will be the first time whereby a Section 106 agreement has been used in addition to CIL. We are a community infrastructure levy authority, and this will be the first time where both mechanisms have been applied. We've had legal advice on this, and they can be applied. So thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. If we move to Justin, could you please introduce it? Sorry, Marion, we're not getting you.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm trying to do it remotely and it's a bit of a strange, yeah, just to go through the presentation. These are the photographs of the site, which is arable field, currently 8.84 hectares, which is approximately 21 acres. So that's each corner of the site. You can see it sort of rises up slightly from Heath Road towards the southern boundary, where there is a line of trees and then some lower growth there. These are pictures at the Heath Road side of the site. The house shown there is Appletree Cottage, which is the dwelling closest to the development site, and the building there is existing doctor's surgery fronting Heath Road. This is the application site relative to Coxheath. As members will be aware, Coxheath did expand in the local plan review with a new development allocation called Beacon Park. So that does actually effectively extend the Coxheath towards the east, closer towards the application site, which obviously is now in closer proximity to that village. This is the master plan, and these are the 4 elements here. This is the care home element. This element here is 14 assisted living units for, it's aimed to be for autistic adults. This area here is an area indicated to be retirement bungalows, primarily aimed at the over 60s who are retired and in housing need, and these will all be affordable dwellings. And this area here is allocated for the hospice. It is a hybrid application. We have details of the care home, details of the supported living units, but the retirement bungalows and the hospice are both in outline at this stage. And if permission were to be granted, details would come in as reserve matters subsequent to any permission being granted. This is indication of the care home that will front the gap in Heath Road. And these are the elevations. It's a building that obviously has a fairly long form, narrow frontage, relatively more narrow frontage to Heath Road, but then long form depth into the site. And these are the dimensions to the closest neighbouring property, which is Apple Tree Cottage. This is the elevations, artist impressions of the supported living units, which will be the units behind the surgery. This is illustrative drawings of how the hospice is intended to be designed and laid out. Effectively, the bedrooms for the terminally ill will be in this complex here, the circular complex, 12 bedrooms, and the main hospice facilities and where these community support team will be based is in a larger structure away to the northern part of the site. This is the proposed access point. Effectively, they were sharing the existing access that currently serves the doctor's surgery. It will just, instead of turning in, it will continue down with the service lay-by included as well. This illustrates one of the proposed locations of the zebra crossing. This did elicit some objections from the residents here, so an alternative has been submitted. The alternative moves the zebra crossing further away to the east, so there's less interference with the neighbouring properties. Because the zebra crossing is going to an area of carriageway that's currently 40 miles an hour, there's a need to slow the traffic down, ideally to 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. The proposal is to add a build out where the current 30-mile-an-hour, 40-mile-an-hour exit point is, and then towards Linton Crossroads itself, another build out to actually force the oncoming traffic to slow to 30 so that the speed is within the acceptable range for a controlled crossing. And say this is the scale of the extension of the 30-mile zone. Currently it's here, just at the start of where the housing development is here, and we're proposed to start here. Just to go back to the master plan, while I detail some more issues. Hopefully members will be aware there's an urgent update circulated earlier in the week. Effectively, we had one more objection, specifically on a concern about the traffic calming near to Vanity Lane and whether that was safely designed. Continuing concern about traffic congestion, specifically during the school collection times. And they also pointed out that they felt that the road safety audit ignored the fact that Beacon Park, this site here, will also have to access this general vicinity in the near future if that were to get planning permission as per the allocation. The urgent update also detailed that KCC Highways did respond to the road safety audit for the zebra crossing option 1. They effectively say that in their view, the existing crossing that's in situ, which is simply drop curbs and not controlled, is adequate, notwithstanding that. And they say it's the council's request for that rather than the county council's request. They do have concerns about whether or not the speed can be taken down from the 40 to a closer speed towards 30 miles an hour with the system designed. So they haven't objected as such, but they haven't not objected. They've indicated concerns with the technicalities of the traffic calming proposed by the applicant. As a result of that, the urgent update detailed that we're recommending a variation to one of the suggested conditions that will require the traffic calming measures and the road crossing improvement to be subject to an acceptable road safety audit, and obviously we'll expect that to have been okayed by the county council. So as we currently don't have that, the suggestion is that be required by condition. That would be required before any development were to commence, and assuming it were to be approved and KCC were in support, the measures themselves would have to be in place before there was any occupation. So that's a summary of the urgent update. Just to describe some of the features of the site, which we feel are important in terms of assessing the impact on the character of the area. Vanity Lane has a hedgerow of approximately 4 metres high, and the visibility of the site along this stretch is limited in that regard. In the southwest corner, there is a mature belt of trees in situ. And as Rob described, Linton Hill itself is also sunken below the level of the land, which means the sort of visibility of the site is restricted in there as well. Clearly along Heath Lane itself, there's currently ribbon development along the majority of the northern boundary of the site, with just the gap here where there will be an infill building. There will be a 30-metre setback to the building so that the frontage can be heavily landscaped as far as possible. The Greensand walkway is down here, so about 180 metres away from the application site, and there are some existing orchards intervening. There's currently been some advanced planting of some 1,600 saplings in this general vicinity here, which the applicant has promoted as being able to be matured up by that it's been advanced planting to give some early screening to any development where permission to be granted. To the care home. The care home is a 73 beds building. It's 2 stories with a sort of tabletop roof to keep the bulk down. There'll be 28 parking spaces. The retirement bungalows is an outline, so we don't have any details of their elevational treatment or size as such, but they are generally to be either single story or 1.5 story, so relatively low rise, and a central amenity green area will be allowed here. The application has come in for 58 units, but we've put a condition on, suggested condition that it'll be 52 units in this area here. We feel that's important because we do feel that you need to get more greenery here potentially, so that as you approach through the site, you'll have a nice complete vista through to the landscape and buffer planting at the rear of the site. So we would envisage a lower number of bungalows than has actually been applied for by suggesting that condition. The retirement bungalows would be for generally over 60s, but the housing officer did request that someone over 50 who's retired through ill health or disability should not be precluded from occupying one of the properties if need be, and that's been incorporated into one of the suggested heads of terms. I think I've described all that. Going back to the need case, as detailed in the report, all of these uses are not allocated for in the local plan review. Therefore, the expectation is they come from windfall developments. Currently, care homes, we've have some buildings of care homes, but it's sort of the applications have dried up recently, and ones we have had, we've refused and they've lost on appeal. So there's currently a deficit of 185 bed spaces on current build rates, and because these sorts of properties do take several years to come to fruition, that deficit would worsen as the years progress. So we feel there's a significant unmet need for care home bed spaces, which is why we're supportive of this element here. Similarly, there's no sizable retirement type bespoke bungalows developments that help to meet the need for the ageing population. So again, we feel there's a need justified there. Clearly, the hospice is a bespoke one-off. Its current site in Aylesford, my understanding is it's outgrown that and it needs a different location with the space potentially to expand if need be, but also allowing its community outreach service to have a better base from which to work. And it does feel that the site is accessible for their staff to make that function. One issue that's been raised in the committee report you'll see will be archaeology. We have concluded that whilst trial trenching before determination would have been the ideal, that hasn't happened. But we decided a post-determination condition would be appropriate here. And we've secured in the legal agreement a clause whereby if there were to be important archaeological remains found, that would require the applicant to come back and redesign the scheme to make sure that the archaeology was kept in situ if that were to be discovered on site. Going back to the issue of residential amenity, the care home design has been redesigned. Originally, it wrapped around more of an L shape. So this area, this bulk here, has been moved away from that area. So although clearly it is a building where currently open land and will affect views of existing properties, we're satisfied that the amendments, the distances, and together with sort of careful design of the upper floor windows, means that there won't be any impact on amenity that warrants a refusal of this application. Yes, just to clarify, the off-site works are the upgrade to Heath Road crossing, the two options. And as Rob explains, they're also making contributions towards Linton Crossroads and also offering land at the Crossroads junction to facilitate any improvements that were to come in the future. Back to the master plan, in terms of open space, as detailed, this is a 50 to 70 metre depth buffer planting of woodland planting species. It's a 12-metre width along this boundary here so that it wraps around and creates more screening as it matures. And overall biodiversity net gain is being secured on site, and that will be 20%, and a 30-year management plan will be secured in the legal agreement were permission to be granted. So I think that hopefully that's explained the scheme. So I can answer any questions if members wish to raise it once the public speakers have completed their submissions.
Okay, thank you very much, Marion. I'll now move to the speakers. So Mrs. Bratt, if you could come forward. When you do go to speak, just push the button in the centre. You've got 3 minutes. The little one with the speech button.
I'm here to appeal to you to make the right decision and refuse this application for a huge development that is outside of policy designed to protect our open countryside. As homeowners of Apple Tree Cottage, the enormous care home would completely encase and loom over our family home. I'm here to protect the privacy of my young family. This application has already had a hugely negative impact on us over the past 3 years, causing an insurmountable amount of stress. The policy on care homes is clear, stating the proposal will not adversely affect the character of the locality or the amenity of neighbouring properties, including by means of noise, disturbance or intensity of use, or by way of size, bulk or overlooking. A 73-bed care home of this size and bulk, running the full length of our home, garden and beyond at a mere 16 metres, cannot do anything other than contradict that policy. This is a huge commercial building operating 24/7, giving staff, residents and visitors clear sightlines into our home, garden, all day, every day. Put yourself in our shoes. At 10 metres tall, this large-scale building will dominate, causing loss of light and make us feel like prisoners in our own home. The car park behind our garden will be a hive of activity 24/7. This loss of privacy and amenity will be utterly devastating for us as a family. In 2021 and 23, the agent entered into pre-planning for a near identical development, minus the hospice. They were advised it would be refused because it was against policy. The case officer's pre-planning advice before the hospice was added was a complete contradiction to her latest committee report, not a slight change, a complete contradiction. Aspire, the care home developer, then attempted to buy a home for its plot. The only reason they would attempt this is because a commercial care home of such monstrous proportions on that slim parcel of land would never be policy compliant in such close proximity to a local resident. They were underhand and aggressive in their pursuit. We were made to feel insignificant, a problem they needed to eliminate to achieve their master plan. It is clear for all to see that the land donation to the hospice after 2 failed pre-planning attempts is a ploy to twist the arm of the planning department for no other reason than profiteering from the rest of the development. This must be considered in its entirety and not just one element. It must abide by the same rules as every other application. It is not about needs and benefits, it's about material planning regulations. With the site deemed not policy compliant, we committed to making Linton our forever home and invested substantially to make that happen. We want to raise our 2 boys in the countryside that we love, with their schools and grandparents nearby. This application should have never got this far, and you should scrutinise the motives behind why. Policy should be upheld to protect our landscape of local value and its residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Moving on, Councillor Cheesewell for Linton Parish Council. Oh, Criswell, sorry. Apologies. I believe I've seen it, so you know exactly what you're doing. So.
Good evening. Linton Parish Council objects to this. All our local infrastructure, roads, utilities and support services are overstretched and in places broken due to overdevelopment. The infrastructure delivery plan is a living document published in 2022. Page 3 states, to ensure that infrastructure is properly planned for, funded and provided alongside planned development in the borough. None of the lead agencies have updated the document for our area because they have no plans. Resources are set north of Maidstone Town Centre as the local plan. This large resource draining planning application, if approved, will cause a disproportionate drain on our infrastructure, and yet nothing in this application or case officer's report explains how the existing problems are to be rectified to such an extent that the area can take on yet more development, let alone this one. Greensand Health Centre is swamped with demand. It is not coping, yet the report is silent on how the increase in demand will be met with the significant need that this site will require. Bottom line is, if approved, you're increasing the problems for existing patients and placing these new vulnerable ones in harm's way. Maidstone Borough Council and KCC Highways long time ago identified Linton Crossroads as critical to development in our area, as with other areas of infrastructure. The plans are not funded and not delivered, yet our area continues to be developed, both residential and commercial, beyond capacity, causing our old and new communities to suffer, completely at odds with the council's own infrastructure statement. Even the notorious Linton Crossroads, even if modified, will not resolve anything. Some of the congestion will simply move along and increase the problem outside the site. Other clogged up residential roads in the area as well, all the way to the Wheatsheaf in both directions. These are just ordinary residential roads with no capacity to cope. The latest urgent update typifies the state of the infrastructure when a highway matter isn't resolved after all this time. Why? Because there is no capacity in the local infrastructure to make it happen, and it hints at the impending problems that will inevitably happen if this application is approved. You should uphold the previous 3 decisions to reject this application, which included the appeal inspector, and because the infrastructure plan states you should. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillor. Could I have the applicant, Mrs. Street?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Heart of Kent Hospice is proud to be part of this partnership that would bring much needed facilities and a mix of accommodation to the heart of Maidstone. This is an exciting opportunity to demonstrate that Maidstone is a compassionate community that makes provision for its citizens that need additional support to live, work and thrive independently, to ensure that its residents have access to a variety of accommodation, housing and care provision as they age and become more frail, and one that recognises the importance of excellent community-centred palliative and end-of-life care. Heart of Kent Hospice have been looking for a new site for over 7 years, and this is the only site that's been able to meet our needs. Many of you will have attended fundraising events and read our literature, which highlights the work that we do and the growing demand for end-of-life care. Soon, there will be more deaths than there are births in the UK. Our ability to meet this demand is significantly restricted by the limited space that we have at our existing facility. This site is well located for us, being a central location that provides high quality landscape setting for those staying on the inpatient unit for end-of-life care or for short stays for symptom control. This site will also allow us the space and facilities to meet this increasing demand and enhance our community outreach. Furthermore, it gives us the opportunity to work collaboratively with the care home provider and the existing doctor's surgery, which will be of benefit to the borough as a whole. But of course, this proposal is about more than just the hospice. The provision of 14 assisted living units for young autistic adults will be testament to the people of Maidstone, showing that they know how to support these people to live full and independent lives. Kent County Council in full support of this proposal and will be working with the applicant to house those most suited to this kind of accommodation. And these will be residents with a Maidstone connection, again helping to meet a local need. And at the hospice, we look forward to being able to offer employment opportunities to these individuals. Likewise, the provision of affordable bungalows for the over 60s. There's a significant shortfall of properties of this type, and this scheme will help to meet some of the borough's need. And it's been agreed with the council that we will seek local residents to fill these units first. Thus, again, this component is aimed at meeting the borough's need. And finally, the care home. As set out in the report, there is a significant need for care provision, and this facility goes a long way to meeting that need. It has been designed through discussions with neighbours and local councillors to minimise its visual impact. The scheme has been significantly amended to pull the proposal away from the nearest residents. We do appreciate that this will alter the view of the occupiers of Apple Tree Cottage, but as set out in the report, this is not a grounds to object. And in addition to these benefits, the proposal will see the planting of a new woodland consisting of approximately 4,000 trees, which will create significant biodiversity net gain in the area.
So can I ask you to wrap up?
I'd like to thank the officers and members who've worked with us on this proposal and helped us improve the scheme. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee. This scheme is opposed by Lewes and Linton parishes in my ward. Of primary concern is the impact on the highway and more specifically the Linton Crossroads, currently deemed beyond capacity. The applicant has worked with NBC to develop a crossing requiring a speed reduction to 30 miles an hour with traffic calming measures. I welcome the conditioning of these measures, but I'm concerned by KCC's report, which cautions that the plan will require highways approval. Traffic calming build-outs are unpopular and failure to gain approval could make the highways works undeliverable. If this happens, the developer would likely seek the removal of this condition. Given the small stretch of highway from the site to the crossroads, I would urge the committee to at least consider adding an informative to extend the 30-mile-an-hour limit eastwards to 300 metres beyond the crossroads. If calming is to be installed and given the proximity, if calming is to be installed and given the proximity to the junction, it is likely that the mean speed in this extended area would be acceptable. This would greatly improve road safety where many school children cross. While the recently adopted policy LPR HOU 07 allows development of a care home adjacent to a settlement boundary, the outline permission at the site gives a foothold for significant housing and further development beyond the settlement boundary. With a likely additional 6 vehicle movements per day per unit at the site, there will be significant harm on the local highways network, which will be aggravated when Beacon Park comes forward. Please consider the impact to neighbours, specifically in light of policies LPR SP 15, Principles of Good Design, and LPR HOU 07. While there are screening opportunities, there's little to mitigate the massing and impact of the care home extended southwards beyond residential gardens. Also note that the existing demand for parking at the Greensand Medical Centre is often beyond capacity. Thought should be given to the intensity of use and how this scheme will affect the character of this locality outside of Coxheath settlement boundary in landscape of local value, where residents will be exposed to levels of intense use and activity, vehicle movements and visual intrusion at the site. This development has come forward in this less than ideal location, in part due to NBC's failure to strategically allocate sites for hospice, special needs and elderly accommodation, instead relying on windfall provision. I urge members to consider this at the next local plan review.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Keeley.
Good evening, Chairman and members. This evening I speak to you as both councillor and resident. We have had a host of concerns about this proposed development, many of which you've already heard from colleagues and residents. There is also much confusion as to why a development which has been knocked back twice at pre-planning, both in August 2021 and March 2023, is being reconsidered because further development has been added to the plan. The same case officer stated in March 2023, and I quote, "The principle is unacceptable when judged against national and local policy protecting the countryside and areas of local landscape value, and is also contrary to the spatial strategy." The case officer goes on to say, development on the site would have very significant visual impacts in terms of character and appearance of the countryside, which lies in the landscape of local value. And the fact the proposal would result in a much greater site coverage and siting much further southward and infill an important gap on Heath Road itself. It's also worth noting that this information came via the Freedom of Information Act as requested by the resident of Appletree Cottage, Mr. Batt. That request took over 50 days to be completed. As you're all aware, the standard time frame for an FOI compliance is 20 days. That information came through yesterday. Lastly, I would also like to raise concerns about the proposed street infrastructure, particularly the proposed build-outs as a traffic calming measure. Whilst I completely agree that a pedestrian crossing is vital, the build-outs will only compound existing issues with queues and delays. The proposed plan would effectively create a slalom effect on a very busy short stretch of the road, creating a very dangerous environment for pedestrians, residents, as they exit their driveways and for those coming and going from the doctor's surgery, not to mention the future traffic impact from the proposed Beacons Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Members, this site is in the countryside, defined as anywhere in the borough outside the defined settlement boundaries, i.e. the Maidstone urban area, rural service centres and the larger villages. Justification is largely given for reasons of needs and benefits, which are not planning considerations for building in the countryside. It is simple. This site and application doesn't fit with our local plan. It is not part of our spatial policy and it doesn't fit with our planning policy. Indeed, without the hospice, the applicant was told quite clearly in 2021 and again in March 2023, the application would be refused. But here we are with a hybrid application asking us to determine 4 aspects as one collective. Collectively, it immediately contravenes Local Plan Review Spatial Policy 9.2. Development proposals in the countryside will not be permitted unless they accord with other policies in this plan and not result in significant harm to the rural character and appearance of the area. The harm. The care home introduces a large, bulky residential institution building across a huge footprint. It is nearly 3 times the size of the neighbouring doctor's surgery, which already dominates the current street scene. The care home would significantly undermine the green, open character of the landscape leading up the Greensand Ridge, thus unacceptably eroding the rural character and appearance of one of our landscapes of local value. As such, the development would be over-dominant urban building in a rural setting and would significantly erode the open green character. Other policies, Local Plan Review, Housing Policy 7, Specialist Residential Accommodation. Development can take place on land adjacent to the settlement boundary, provided it meets certain criteria. However, the site isn't adjacent to the settlement boundary. There is 400 metres approximately of orchard between the site and the nearest houses of St Lawrence Crescent. The site isn't even in Coxheath Parish, despite constant reference to Coxheath in the report. It is actually in Linton. Criteria 1C, the proposal will not adversely affect the character of the locality or the amenity of the neighbouring properties, including by means of noise disturbance or intensity of use, or by way of size, bulk or overlooking. As the report states, the care home operates 24/7. It doesn't get any more intensive than that. The scale and bulk of the care home, just 16.9 metres and in places as close as 6 metres from the nearest residential property, can't fail to significantly overlook, therefore removing all privacy. Much time, money and resources have been put into developing our local plan. We voted to adopt it and at the first opportunity are being asked to contravene these policies clearly stated in it. I urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Before I go to members, I'm just going to bring Officer Rob Jarman back in to answer some of the issues that have been raised.
Thank you, Chairman. In no particular order, as I set out in my what I call a strategic presentation is, as Councillor Clark pointed out, the fact of the matter is the local plan review, the development plan makes no allocation for these kind of uses. As I said, first principles about planning, including legal principles, is section 38(6) of the Act says you must make decisions in accordance with the development plan. But the development plan doesn't make any allocations, so there's nothing to be in line with. What it also says is that unless material circumstances indicate otherwise, and a classic material circumstance is need, there's, as set out in the report, there's clearly a need. It is not being met, and that is going to get worse unless sites are delivered. It's implicit, and I think it's even mentioned, that for care homes, because we don't allocate, it seems pretty implicit to me that we rely on windfall sites. We rely on the development management process, i.e. planning applications coming in. So there's a vacuum in the local plan review, but at the same time, there's a big need, and it's going to grow unless we start delivering these kind of sites. In terms of pre-app, not a great deal of weight can be attached to a pre-app. What matters is the planning application that's before you. It's a formal planning application. But park that for a minute. With any pre-application discussion, correspondence, obviously it's an iterative process, and my officers try to negotiate a better deal. It's as straightforward as that. So there's been a number of changes to this scheme before the application was submitted as a result of pre-application discussions. I think there was a meeting involving councillors. It's an iterative process, and changes have carried on post-submission as well. In terms of infrastructure, as I said earlier, yes, I'm saying myself that clearly there's a need to improve Linton Crossroads. It is in the infrastructure delivery plan. In this town hall, I think it was 2 years ago now, I recommended that community infrastructure levy money went towards the funding of improvements to Linton Crossroads. I can't remember the exact amount, but we've built up a substantial amount of Section 106 monies to contribute to that. So the SIL money would have been top-up funding. And lastly, on infrastructure, fairly recently, the local plan review inspector, in allocating what is called Beacon Park on the opposite side of Heath Road, I think for 85 dwellings, mentioned his concern about Linton Crossroads being over capacity, and dealt with it through the allocation at Beacon Park by saying that a planning obligation would have to be submitted as part of any application on Beacon Park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob, for that. We have no ward councillors actually on here, so Tony, you indicate to speak first.
Thank you, Chairman, members. This is a really significant planning application. I think we need to give it the attention and treat it with the respect it requires, because it potentially can bring significant benefits, but it also brings its challenges for the planning process. It lays bare another flaw in the local plan review, and every week, whether it's countryside protection, whether it's affordable housing, whether it is the specialist accommodation we need in an ageing society, it is silent. And what the National Planning Policy Framework and the NPPG says, that essentially if the development plan is silent on something, we don't have a leg to stand on in terms of opposing it from a policy perspective. So it's a really big gap, and a very curious gap in the local plan, where we know all of the need there is for extra care accommodation, the need there is for assisted living units and so on. Is quite puzzling. However, as well as that need in terms of society and Maidstone as a whole, I think this is an important application for Linton and for Cox Heath in particular, because this is, no matter that there's still a few apple trees left in between, it's an urban edge site, which I don't know if anybody here thinks that it's going to survive as an open arable field for very long. We know it will be developed. And I actually think, through the fact that this is not currently an allocated site, we all know that unallocated sites, we get better schemes, because the developer has to go further in terms of quality, in terms of landscaping, in terms of all of the things we need to mitigate the impact. I'm also very concerned that if this went, as it inevitably would, and I think everybody knows it will be the next domino to fall in terms of the expansion of Cox Heath, if it is market housing, it will be a denser development and it will generate more traffic. So all of the issues we've heard about Linton Crossroads and those issues are a real problem. It would also have a bigger impact upon long-term views from towards the Greensand Ridge. And in those pre-application discussions, we expressed profound concern as members about impact on the countryside and impact on the landscape. And to their credit, the landowners and the applicants have planted up the woodland shore along the scarp of the Greensand Ridge, so it's already starting to grow and to provide some screen. And I think that is an important consideration around landscape impact and creating a visual full stop. But I think that the really critical issue for me is that when the surgery went in, we wanted a crossing on Heath Road. We didn't get it because of various issues with Kent County Council and so on. This development, with its very good landscaping, with its quite low-key use, even though it has got some big buildings, will bring us a crossing. And we currently have residents, elderly residents in the estate on the other side of Heath Road from the surgery, having to get a taxi from their homes in order to get to the surgery because they can't get across the road. And for whatever reason, we've not delivered that crossing that was expected. This planning application unlocks that need. So on balance, and it is finely balanced, I think the social benefits, the mitigation in terms of landscaping that's gone in, and the transportation and road safety benefits accruing do make this acceptable in a planning judgment. The one thing though I did want to raise was the point that the ward councillor for Linton raised around the limit of the 30-mile extension limit extension. An informative was talked about. As we know, an informative doesn't hold a lot of water, but if we are requiring the additional safety audit work and we're requiring a really bright light to be shone on the road safety issues, I do wonder whether we can have something stronger than an informative. And I'd be really keen to hear the officers' views on that point. But if that issue was suitably resolved, I will be happy to move that we do grant permission with the urgent update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Before I move on to anyone else, I will let Rob Drummond answer that question.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I should have said it earlier. As has been mentioned tonight, there is still ambiguity about the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and perhaps associated traffic calming. So I would recommend a change to the recommendation that it's delegated powers in liaison with local ward members, the chairman and vice chairman of planning committee to agree the specification of the measures to ensure that 30-mile-an-hour speeds are achieved, or words to that effect.
So coming back, Chairman, with that tweak and the additional information in the urgent update that's in front of us all, I will move that we do grant. Thank you.
You have a seconder for that? Okay, actually, I will second that. I'll reserve my right to speak. Okay, Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a fascinating and difficult one right at the start of the new local plan for all the reasons that we've heard. It's not in the local plan. It's in the countryside. It breaches that consistency that we want, contravenes the sort of plans that we want. I do question, I think, some of the bits, and I certainly question when the local plan went through the need for care homes, given that Kent County Council's stated policy is to reduce the number of care home places. That doesn't seem to appear anywhere in here, and indeed KCC Adult Services and Commissioning have not responded, which worries me immensely. There is a natural shift that most authorities are moving away from care homes towards home care. That said, care homes are private as well as social services. There's also no response from the NHS, and whilst I know quite a lot about NHS commissioning, whilst I know that hospices generally aren't technically commissioned through contract, there is a significant interest in there, and there is funding for most hospices from the NHS. So I'm surprised that there is no response, and that again worries me. I'm also worried that moving the hospice from a place that is very accessible in Preston Hall to this part of Maidstone may cause some specific problems. I do very much understand the need for a bigger hospice. It clearly, the need is clearly there. But of course, we do have a medical campus that at Junction, whatever it is, 6 or 7, can't remember. 7, and that kind of feels like the right sort of place for a hospice. I'm also questioning whether or not the autistic young adults accommodation is in the right place. Now, I've heard, I suspect people will differ on their views, but that may or may not be the right place. I've certainly had comments that it's not the best place for autistic young adults to be living. I think I'm just going to come on to the final point, I suppose, is the crossing. And yes, clearly a crossing is needed. I wonder whether that crossing should be further up in terms of serving particularly the GP surgery. If we put it the side it's showing on the plan, people are going to have to walk down and then back from the majority of Cox Heath. If it was further up the road, then it may be more palatable for people, and perhaps we wouldn't get people trying to cross before the zebra crossing. And indeed, whether or not it should be a correct zebra crossing, and maybe a pelican crossing may be safer. So I'm still undecided. I'd love to hear more views, but I've got deep reservations as it sits at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking as someone who used to work in Cox Heath at Heathside, anyone who thinks the 89 bus saves the village well has never tried getting it coming off a night shift. That's all I can say. The other issue I have is, again, as Councillor Jeffries pointed out, the no response from the NHS. I'm being contacted by a number of people in various areas regarding large care homes being built and the impact on GP services and an already overwhelmed area. These care homes never provide their own doctors. I agree with you. I think the place to locate maybe the hospice is the Kim's site. And I also agree with you, Councillor Jeffrey, as someone who has worked in social care along with people with various levels of autism, that that may not be the place for them. The other thing I would say in terms of this whole application is that affordable isn't affordable. I'm sorry, if you're building something for the over 55s or retired people who need that help early because of disabilities, then it would need to be at social rent and not at affordable rent, because I think most of us around this table agree that affordable is unaffordable if you're an ordinary working person. Green Sands, and I use Heath Road quite a lot. That stands out as a massive medical centre, quite at odds actually, in my opinion, with the countryside. The other issue I would say, and I speak as someone who had a care home built near me, you will know Councillor Harwood, the Maidstone Care Centre, but I can tell you those lights are on at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and if you wake up in a bit of a daze, it's like an episode of the X-Files where you think, where's all this light coming from? Which again for me would contradict putting people who have sensory issues on the same site. So for me, I have real concerns. In terms of KCC adult social care, I can tell you, because I used to work for them, that their attitude is they don't want people in specialist placings. They want to keep people at home. The reason the funding for care homes is being cut is because KCC will not source them. They want to keep people at home and being looked after in the community. So it's only people who will be able to afford to pay privately, in my opinion, that will benefit from this. But I just feel this is totally out of keeping with the area. We have a medical campus where we can locate the hospice, and we already have a massive Edith Cavell home on that site as well, along with another one which is Care UK, as well as a Signet Hospital. So whilst I do say we need some of the bungalows, etc., if they're unaffordable for people who are going to be looking to be moved there, then who's going to get them? So in terms, for me, I have real concerns about it. I have real concerns for the residents who are there, and you're not in my ward, so I've got no axe to grind. I can only speak from personal experience. And I yet to be convinced, I'm sorry, that this is an application that we should approve.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I would emphasise as well, we can only comment on the application in front of us. We cannot suggest about building stuff in a different area. So I'm just making the point that that's what we have to, and I do believe from being to the pre-meeting that the applicant has talked to a autism special needs charity about the home within the area as well. But Officer Rob John wants to come back in with a few comments.
Yes, first and foremost, I was going to say the same thing as you, Chairman. There may be other sites in this borough or another district, but we have to, by law, determine what's in front of us, and whatever concerns you may or may not have about the running of these facilities, first and foremost, you have to identify planning harm. So if councillors are saying they don't like this location, they have to say why they don't like this location, as in you can see it from this viewpoint and it's going to be obtrusive. As I said earlier, clearly you would be able to see the care home from Heath Road. In my opinion, and if we could look at the aerial photograph again, or just the map on your papers, to my mind, it is clearly a gap in Ribbon development. As I said, you know, for the other elements of this proposal, Linton Hill is the carriageway itself is really cut into the land. You have got good screening there. The same thing for Vanity Lane. As has been commented on previously, I'd love to see every development have 50 to 60 metre deep native tree planting, but it, as Councillor Harwood said, simply doesn't happen, but we have got it here. You know, there's the Brow in the Scarp, mainly single-story buildings. I think it would, as I said, I haven't heard any identified harm. So I'd be struggling at this point in time to go along with a refusal, I'm afraid to say.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. So my first point as a new councillor was I'm slightly worried that there was no point of disclosure in this application, that it had been brought to committee before in 2021 and 2023. If that hadn't been mentioned by one of our speakers, I would have been completely ignorant of that, and I think it is relevant. My next point is, you know, I'm absolutely all for hospice care. I think it's a very noble and honourable thing. I'm absolutely all for social housing, etc. And I get the need for care homes. But if we look at the, I think it was called the map view, the next slide. If that's possible. This one here. What strikes me is there's a very clear building line behind the current housing along Heath Road. You can see it. It sort of starts wider on the right-hand side and becomes narrower. And so I don't see this as an infill. You know, an infill to me would be putting something of a similar purpose actually adjacent to the houses or whatever, the, you know, the medical centre that's already there. The point of contention on this one for me is the care home. It's not the other pieces. The care home is colossal. There's no other way to describe it. You know, it dominates that plan, but it doesn't have to be that big and occupy all of that space. It's just, for the test for me is always, is it the right development in the right place? And I don't think it's the wrong type of development. I don't think it's wrong to have something here, but just something of that scale to me is completely inappropriate and should be rethought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I do believe with the scale of it, and the officers may correct me here, there is a financial issue with and the scaling of it, that a care home nowadays needs to be about 70 places to make it financially viable with the new regulations, etc. So hence why we're seeing more coming to our papers with the larger applications. But I do sympathise with what you're saying.
So in which case it's not the right development in the right place.
Again, as the officers pointed out, we have no policy that's against it being in this place, because we don't have a policy within our local plan that deals with the care homes. So we're in a rock and a hard place. I understand where you're coming from. At the same time, apart from Councillor Harwood, I've heard no actual legal reasons why we can actually object to it. And be successful in the objection to go with it. On that note, then, do we have a Councillor Spooner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening very carefully to everybody's comments. I came here with an open mind, as we all have to. I have every respect for the Heart of Kent Hospice. Great admiration for the work that they do. I realise their difficulty of finding a new site, but I honestly feel that this is not the right site for them, especially as it can only be provided with the provision of a lot of extra development, which will be of no benefit whatsoever to Coxheath. It will extend the built-up area. I have every respect for the way the officers have worked on this application with the developers. I fully understand where they're coming from in their recommendations to us. It is very seldom that I disagree with the recommendations of our officers, but on this occasion, I feel I have to, because I just do not see how the social benefits, which is what the officers are saying, overrides the objections from the landscape point of view, the environmental impact on the local area, the environmental impact on the local residents. I just don't see it outweighed by what is claimed to be unique benefits of the hybrid scheme. All of those uses are footloose. They could go anywhere, but they've just been put into Cox Heath. It's been mentioned about the local plan. Well, we've got a local plan. It's been found sound by a government inspector. It has taken 6 years of meticulous work, been subject to all sorts of analysis, 3 rounds of public consultation, and it's always easy to be wiser after the event and say, well, why didn't we have this? Why didn't we have that? There's never has been a perfect local plan, and there never will be. We could have had allocations or could have had policies about retirement homes, about assisted living or what have you, but they would all be surely subsumed within the 18,000 new dwellings that our local plan provides for. On that basis, I am inclined to move that we refuse this application on the grounds of effect on the landscape and the effect on the residents of Cox Heath, and being contrary to the proposals of the local plan. We have a local plan, going back to it once again, which actually allocates land at Junction 7 for a Kent Medical Campus. I mean, that is the ideal location for the Heart of Kent Hospice and for any other social or medical facilities that are needed throughout the borough. Sticking them out in Cox Heath, I'm sure it's a lovely place, but it is peripheral to the main urban area of Maidstone. And as I say, I would like to move refusal, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do I have a second for that?
Second that.
Do you want to speak now, Councillor Summerskill?
Thank you. Just really a clarification of being new to the committee, a hybrid application. 2 of the factors are in outline. Is it feasible, if this was given overall planning permission and then the hospice decided not to move here, that we could then end up with these original 3 elements, which were deemed by, as we've been told, to be unacceptable without the hospice in previous discussions?
Sorry, there's quite a lot of points here. In terms of, I think, disclosure was mentioned earlier, we don't, as a rule, disclose pre-application discussions. There have been no planning applications here. There has been next door, the doctor's surgery. There's no planning applications. As I said earlier, more fundamentally, I'm struggling with the putative reasons for refusal. Sorry if that sounds negative, but the point about need is, as I mentioned some time ago now, the National Planning Policy Framework says that local planning authorities have to assess need and then deliver on it. So it's not a nice to have, it's something. I'm talking first principles here of planning. And sorry, it's a bit of an elephant in the room, but it hasn't been done. And clearly, any planning inspector, and there's a big difference in terms of detail between, you know, local plans and the detail of a planning application. First and foremost, the planning inspector would have to look at the National Planning Policy Framework, because that's at the top of the hierarchy, national government policy. And as I keep saying, it says all English local planning authorities have to make this assessment. We have made this assessment, as is set out in the papers in some detail, and there's a big need. Now, I'm not for one moment saying that's the be all and end all, but it would be a major material consideration at appeal. But secondly, I haven't heard any landscape objection. The applicant has submitted what's called an LVIA, a landscape impact assessment. I've gone through the mitigation that's proposed, but nobody thus far has been able to say, and this is what will be required, that the site is visible from X location. And as just as fundamentals with any planning application, I need that. I can help members, but I haven't had anything like the detail I need. And as has been set out, another first principle of any planning application is one can't just say, I think another location's better, because that's just not in front of us.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Councillor Mark Nagy.
Thank you. I was going to say that the end of life care is a very important service that we have available to us. I do believe that it will be an important part in all of our lives. So going forward, I think even if we were to put this off, how much is this going to cost in the future when we come to the next site and the next site? We're going to be price scaling this out of affordability by prolonging this. And I agree, there are other sites, like, for example, if this was on a smaller scale and we could fit it in Kim's, that's what it's for. It would be nice if we could squeeze everything in. But at some point, we are going to run out of spaces that we can protect as countryside. We have to look after people first as a priority, I believe, personally. So if we have the ability to offer a service that I think is crucial to everyone in Maidstone at some point, we should be looking to do everything in our power to make this work for us, especially if the company is looking to provide us with that money to help with the speed management of the existing infrastructure. So I admit I can appreciate where the residents are coming from, and I understand that having this sort of development can be a big implementation on the surrounding area. But I believe also that we have a GP site going in opposite on this site, which would help with that supporting of the doctor situation. So I'd be interested to see if that would be, how that would benefit the work here. Yeah, I just yes, sorry, just to wrap up very quickly, apologies for rambling. I just think we really have to consider this seriously, because at some point I'm just worried that we might not be able to get those services in to Maidstone if we don't look at it now. And even if, just to finish, if this doesn't go through, what's going to be the plan for it going forward? Is it going to be the next housing estate? Is it going to be a next development, industrial development? I'm very worried that if we can't get it on a medical practice, it may end up in the hands of something else.
Thank you for that, Mark. Yes, I think Tony alluded to that about this is probably a prime area that would, if this development doesn't go through, it would come to fruition for housing. But we are speculating again, and we only are here to comment on the application in front of us. I know you were next, Councillor Jeffries, but you've spoken once, so I'll go to Councillor Dobrensky first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not an expert on care homes by any standard, although I might need one soon. We've got bed spaces running at less than half the cumulative need, and reading those summaries of reasons for recommendation, I can't see really how we can deny this. But one thing I would ask, the idea that the place is running 24/7, well, of course it does. but presumably everyone sleeps at night, and there will only be a limited lighting there overnight, just like there would be on a housing estate, I suppose. But looking at the bigger problem, we don't have enough spaces. Simple as that. And it's all very well saying care for people at home, but you need an army. We're going to need an army of carers with the ageing population we've got. And with that comes high costs of the carers themselves, and also on the administrative burden of making sure that everything's looked after. Whereas all this care is in one location, which is logical. And looking at this site, I think, Councillor Harwood, you're right. Something's going to happen to it, whichever way. And this would seem to be a very good solution. And I think with the amount of mitigation that's there, with the screening, with the trees, then I think, personally, I think it's a good idea. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor, do you want to take your seat? Just to be clear, you can't participate because you've been out for so long. Okay, you haven't been taking part in the discussions. You can't take part in the decisions because you've been absent. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Jeffries.
Just very briefly, Mr. Jarman said that no one has said that the visual impact is unacceptable from a particular place. I believe the visual impact is unacceptable from Heath Road and will have a negative impact, and also from the neighbouring properties, very clearly, as we heard from the speaker. Maybe that helps. Thank you.
I'd probably come back to just remember that obviously your privacy is protected, but your view isn't. That's one of our key things in training when we go through it. Councillor Jeffries, it's not ideal, and don't get me wrong, I sympathise with the house nearby. However, again, we'd be shot down because obviously it's against policy, isn't it? So at the moment, I'm still not hearing. We've got proposed and a seconder, but I'm not hearing any proper legal argument for why we could refuse this. And if we did move to it, I think I'd have to call in just about the costing of this, because I think the office would recommend that we'd lose this appeal. So unless councillors that are against this can actually come up with some real hard facts and policies to go with it, Stuart, I'm just going, what's going to happen? I need that so we can actually make a decision. Okay.
Sorry. Just to add to that, and it's in the case officer's report. I do think it's important, again, in relation to the local plan review, that the council chose, recommended by the inspector, to in effect lower the bar in terms of countryside harm. The test used to be harm. Now it's significant harm. And sorry, Councillor Jeffrey, I'm not going to be your favourite person, but I think we would struggle in an area of ribbon development to argue that it's significant harm, because obviously, because there's development either side, and there will be opposite, it's contained, or it certainly will be in the future.
Okay, Councillor Spooner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find this very, very concerning, because it seems to me we have a local plan, we have our main urban areas, and we have our rural service areas all delineated. It seems to me that any developer can come along, put a few houses or put a development on the outside of any of them, surround it with an equatorial rainforest of landscaping, and say, well, you can't see it. You know, that is a problem that I can see coming along. Sorry, I can. So my argument with regard to Cox Heath is that there will be a severe impact upon the local landscape and on the street scene and on local residents, and that will be the gist of the reasons for refusal. I have also looked, and I'm not trying to ambush anybody, but there was a recent appeal dismissed for a care home in Sutton Valence, 23 500 230 Fulsham House. I'm sure Rob will remember it, where once again there was an objection upheld by the inspector about the impact upon the landscape. Different location, it was isolated. I mean, this one in Coxheath is next to the urban area, but the basic policy objection was the same. Landscape objection and contrary to the local plan. I mean, I think those are the two main reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Okay, I'll bring Rob back in, but to go over those points. But I think we've missed the point. This isn't a housing allocation. This is a need allocation, and we are not supplying at the moment. And I know some councillors don't like that, but we don't have that within our plan. If we did, I know, as you said, it's easy to hit a plan once it's been approved, and you know, we all councillors, some of us were all councillors on that plan. We've kind of dropped the ball that if we had allocations for old people's homes, home areas, we wouldn't be in this situation. However, we haven't, and that's why we are. So I would just say it's not a housing allocation that falls into that same situation as the allocated plan. And as you also know, the amount of Winfield sites that we also have calculated within our plan would be count as a Winfield site as well. So yeah, there's a lot to go with it. And as I said, there's pros and cons, and you know, that's what we're here to debate. So it's noted about your allocations and what we would do, your points, what we would do. I'll bring Rob back in, and then I'm actually going to go to the vote, because I think we've been going on for quite some time. I think we need to get to the point of actually making a decision which way we're going to go, so that the officers can have some time to actually come up with some legal reasons about why we're going to refuse it or agree. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The Sutton Valence appeal, yes, it was dismissed, but what is quoted in the committee report is that the inspector recognised the significant need. It was dismissed purely on its landscape impact. It's on the hill going up to Sutton Valence. It was highly prominent. We, as officers, had very strong landscape objections, and we were able to counter the appellant's landscape impact assessment. So to move on, if this was to be refused on landscape grounds, we would have to counter the applicant's landscape impact assessment. I haven't heard anything on that score. I'm not saying that the sole reason why the landscape impact is not significant, the term used in the local plan review, isn't solely on the landscape belt, the native planting belt, although that is significant. As I keep saying, I was driving down there today, Linton Hill is at much lower level. I couldn't see beyond that. Vanity Lane, that is also cut into the slope, as is pointed out in the case officer's report. There's 4-meter screening. As I said, apart from Heath Road, and we talked, as you said, Chairman, ad nauseum about the fact that there is ribbon development here, so I'm not going to go on about that again. But then lastly, the main views of the site one would get is from the Greensands Ridge public right-of-way. As can be seen from the layout plan, and as Councillor Harwood said, you have a substantial amount of existing tree planting. You have the brow of the hill, and I know it's a ridge. As I said before, the buildings are mainly single story. All of that combined leads me to give you a recommendation that significant landscape harm would not be caused. And as Councillor Summersgill pointed out, this is a hybrid application. You know, personally, I think the conditions are adequate, but you can come up with conditions to tailor the submission of the reserved matter details to alleviate your concerns. Thank you.
Okay, and I said Councillor Somerville.
I just point out that footpath KM64 comes in from the north onto Heath Road, directly where that red dot is, or the red triangle there. So the views from people on the footpath will be directly into the care home.
I think it's best if we go back to the Google Earth to show there are polytunnels here. Sorry, can the case officer provide some detail?
Yeah, so what we have here is this is the ribbon development we've referred to. This is Vanity Lane. The polytunnels are on the south side of Heath Road in this general location here. So all these white stripes is polytunnels in the vicinity.
Yeah, go on, Councillor.
The footpath is coming from the north to Heath Road. There. Yeah. So it reaches Heath Road. Views proceeding on that footpath will be of the care home in its mass when you're heading south.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Summersgill. I didn't really, obviously, yes, I've walked that footpath a number of times. Yes, you would see the care hub from it, but you also see the existing doctor's surgery and the ribbon of existing houses.
That is going to be the outer edge of the new housing allocation as well.
Okay, councillors. Well, we are going to have to vote on this at some point. So, obviously, the against vote came in afterwards. We have to vote on that first. Is it advisable to get a cost warning now?
Yes.
So, who is the legal officer? So, yeah, could I ask the officer for a cost warning? Is that from yourself or from?
Yes. Sorry, I'd advise a cooling off period, as it's called, to get legal advice. Personally, I consider there to be what I call first principle points here.
Okay, I would like to make a decision on this tonight, but we do have a cost warning to go with it. I know we spent quite a lot of time debating this. However, I still feel we haven't got substantial reasons against it to actually uphold that decision. If councillors are mindful to agree with me and actually say that we then, after all this, and I do apologise to the public who've come in today about deferring this, so that we can get that cost warning. Sorry, members of the public, it's not a two-way thing. Thank you. So, open to members. I'm saying we've had a cost warning. Do we want to defer it? Did she get that cost warning?
Sorry,
Okay, apologies. Just while we check the legal side of it. It's the first. Sorry, I'm just getting to check the legal side of it, so that obviously if we do defer or we vote against it, about what the process is. Okay, I've actually checked back on the YouTube stuff and it comes out fine, but I do apologise for the recourse within here is quite a thing, but we have asked for it to be improved. So I'll just hold on and find out what the officers are going to say. Okay. Councillor Cleater.
Sorry, can I just ask for clarification? Because that I think is what Councillor Jeffrey is saying. We've had one proposal to support, one to approve, one proposal to object,
okay.
And you're now saying you want to throw a third into the mix, which is defer. And
No, Councillor Cleater, if I was asking for the officers to clarify about the cost warning, because I do apologise, this is only my second planning meeting. It's the first time I've had to actually do a cost warning. So I was just getting some advice from them about the options that we do have. Okay, so the officer just advised me that if we vote against it, there'll be a cost warning and then a period. Yep. So, okay, so we've had a proposal and a second against it. So I'm going to move that to the vote. So those voting for refusal. Okay. So you're voting to refuse the application.
This is the amendment.
Yes. So this is the amendment. Yeah. So you're voting to refuse the amendment. Those for? Okay. So you have to vote for because it's
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I do apologise for labouring this point. I believe that you've said some sentences including the words cost warning, but I did not hear them all, and I've conferred with colleagues. Can I please ask you to, from the beginning, explain your decision because I could not hear what you said. Thank you.
Okay, so if we vote against it, there'll be a cost warning, and then we have a period to actually sit on the decision before it gets ratified. Is that correct?
Yeah, Debbie might want to chip in. First of all, there has to be, in this case, an amendment. But what I need to know is if it is for a putative refusal, what's crucial to me is knowing on what grounds. What I've heard so far would lead me to a cost warning if you stuck to the grounds that Councillor Spooner stated. But as I think Debbie will advise, first and foremost, you have to vote and set out the reasons for refusal, or an alternative would be to approve it.
Okay. If you could read out the Constitution clarifying what the
Thank you, Chairman. This is what the Constitution says. If during consideration of an application, after a motion has been proposed and seconded, the head of planning and development or the representative, in consultation with the legal officer present at the meeting, which we don't have, believes that the planning committee's reasons to justify refusal, the imposition of conditions would not be sustainable at appeal and would more likely than not cause significant costs to be incurred by the council because of unreasonable behaviour, then they will inform the committee that if the motion is agreed, it will stand deferred to the next meeting of the committee. Following the vote, if the motion is agreed, the decision will be deferred to the next meeting. Oh, sorry.
So is that clear, or do you need? Sorry, the members of the public. So basically, what it means is if we say no tonight to it, it will come back to the next planning meeting to be ratified because there's a significant cost risk to all the people, so obviously all the taxpayers within Maidstone. Yeah, but we vote on, so we need to vote on it first before we do that. Okay, on the amendment.
Yeah, which is
for refusal. So you're voting for refusal. Okay.
Underneath the grounds.
And yeah, and as the officers just stated there, we need some stronger grounds for that to actually happen. So I do look to the people that have actually proposed this and seconded it to actually come up with those stronger grounds on the advice that we've just had. do the seconder and the proposer want an adjournment, so you can actually have a discussion about this.
See, to proceed to the vote, yeah.
No, Councillor, as the officers just pointed out, you need some stronger reasons so we can actually, so the harm you've said isn't, according to the officer, won't stand up. So we need to actually, we need some legal reasons why, what policies it against, etc.
I have outlined some reasons for refusal, which is based upon the landscape impact of the proposal, seen from all directions and seen from the street scene. I didn't come here tonight with reasons for refusal worked out because, as I said, I came to this meeting with an open mind. And I just can't think up of anything in greater detail off the top of my head. If we vote for refusal this evening, which I hope we do, quite happy to have the meeting deferred to come back and let the officers work out some far more vigorous reasons for refusal that we can make use of.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Right, on that note then, we have to move to the vote. Okay, so remember you're voting for review. All those in favour of all those in favour of refusal on the conditions specified by Councillor Spooner and Councillor Summerskill. So those for. Okay, those against. Okay. Okay, so it's the chairman that's casting vote. Up against. Okay, so that amendment is lost. We then move to the substantial vote. So with the conditions and the update we've specified.
And the change, the recommendation is delegated powers, subject to liaison with your good self, Councillor Summersgill and local ward members on, I think Councillor Jeffrey mentioned the actual position of the zebra crossing as well. So it should be the zebra crossing, 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and associated works.
Can I just add a point, sorry? There's a mention that we want the social rent rather than affordable rent. So is that going to be an additional change?
Yes, I think we put that as a recommendation as well, that we need the social rent as well.
Within the section 106, all social rent, or as well as maximum as possible. Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this time we're actually voting in favour of the application. So all those for. Those against. Okay, so again, I have to cast in vote. I vote for. Okay. So the application is approved. So I'm aware we've gone on for almost 2 hours. So I'm going to propose that we take a quick amendment so people can have a toilet break. I believe there is tea and coffee next door, and to be back in here at 5 past. Okay, councillors, are we ready to restart? Okay. Need to go. Okay. Okay, councillors. So moving on to item 18. Okay, I move to the officer to introduce item 13, sorry.
Hello. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to Burford Farm that forms part of Linton Growing Limited's holding. The farm is some 30 hectares in area and it's used for the propagation and growing of blackberry, strawberry and raspberry plants. The submission seeks for polytunnels with all year round coverage over an area of some 5.6 hectares to make good the site's existing access and to lay two concrete bin pads with walling. The development will also see the creation of an attenuation pond in the southeastern corner. The application has been reported to committee at the request of Linton and Hunton Parish Councils. The site is within designated countryside. The lower section of the site falls within flood zones 2 and 3, with the River Built to the south. And there are a number of public footpaths within the locality of the site, including one that runs through its southern end. There has been a delay in reporting this application to committee as there's been much work done in terms of drainage, flood risk and biodiversity. And the submission is now at a point where KCC Flood and Water Management Team, the Environment Agency and KCC Biodiversity all raise no objection. Just the area of the site. It's the view from the entrance at Redwall Lane. This is looking towards the site entrance here. And this is from the site entrance looking further along west along Redwall Lane. This is the view from the public footpath with the application site, sort of where that belt is in there. This is from within the site looking towards Redwall Lane, which runs along the top here. This is the application site here. And this is south towards the river. And then this is looking back west towards the site from the public right of way. Site plan, so the cross section of the polytunnel, and that's just the concrete pads. The development has largely been assessed against local plan policy LPR CD5 that allows for polytunnels in the countryside subject to certain criteria. As the report sets out, the submission is considered proportionate and necessary for the purposes of agriculture. It would not have an adverse impact on the living conditions of local residents when trying to enjoy their own property. The site is not seen to be in an isolated location. It is considered that the development would have a minimal, slight adverse impact on landscape and visual amenity, and the shown landscaping mitigation would help to further blend the scheme into the landscape. Further to this, no specialist consultee objects to the development in terms of how surface water runoff will be dealt with and how the scheme will maintain and enhance site field margins in the interests of encouraging biodiversity. For the reasons set out, the scheme is therefore considered to accord with policy LPR CD5 and it would not cause significant harm to the intrinsic character and appearance of the countryside. Further to this, the development would utilise the existing site access at Redwall Lane and the amount of traffic coming and going from the site would not significantly change as the site is already used to propagate and sell on soft fruit and soft fruit plants. The polytunnels merely seek to improve the health and yield of the plants. It has also been made clear that land levels will not be altered for the polytunnels and additional plans have been submitted this week that show what the existing land levels are on the site. The application is considered to be acceptable in all other planning respects. On this basis, subject to the recommended conditions and with the suggested changes set out in the urgent update and including listing the additional plans within condition 2, a recommendation of approval is therefore made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Summersgill.
Thank you. My main submission will be about my role as parish flood warden. I just wish to point out that I've been involved in water drainage and soil matters for most of my career. It's correct to say that the Kent drainage people have now agreed a condition after 3 attempts at design and comments from myself as flood warden as well. I would note that the KCC's point is, whilst we still have concerns with some statements, we're accepting these can be dealt with as part of a detailed design submission. The concepts that they and myself had problems with is that if we cover a ground with polytunnels, we do not believe that 50% of the rainfall that falls on the polytunnels will absorb into the ground underneath the polytunnels. And also placing a pond in zone 3B, the flood zone, means that in the winter periods, it's full of water or half full of water already. Therefore, its capacity to receive and attenuate waters is restricted. I noticed that conditions 4 and 5 will give the detail to allow a design to be approved and verified. I would bring the councillors' attention to informative 1 also there, which I think is mistakenly, it's pursuant to conditions 4 and 5, not 5 and 6. But that lays bare some of the detail that KCC were concerned about as to how the design would be suitable. I also have some concern generally here for the loss of habitat in the fields around here. We're losing habitat for skylarks and turtle doves, and by taking away the agricultural use there was before. And it does concern me that the biodiversity net gain just covers as it is now and not what there was in its previous usage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Criswell.
Good evening, once again. There is a file in the Enforcement Office for this applicant breaching visual amenity every year since construction of their 30 hectares of polytunnels at their site at Rankins Farm that sits just along the road from this site. What is harmful for the local community is the failure to draw back the covers during the winter months that causes significant glare from the covers to all those on the surrounding hillside. The screening outlined in this application is the same screening plan that was supposed to exist at Rankins Farm. It does not, which is why any 10-year time frame for growing just won't happen when it comes to screening, because they won't implement it. The applicant does not fear the Enforcement Office because they will not act. I have now uncovered our parish council's copy produced by their agents of a 2022 screening plan that we in good faith drew up with the applicant. They accepted there was no screening and a wish to prevent further cycle of reporting breaches. We even sent them a copy of our minutes supporting the plan. They were to commence planting and apply to the planning department. They reneged. There's no action since 2022. Worse is that with this knowledge, they have not replicated in this application the same screening as outlined in their agent's laminated plan, which includes clumps of mature trees spaced out along a 6 metre wide woodland area, so they know what must happen. You can write all the conditions you wish about visual amenity, the landscape and the eco benefits, but this applicant has proven will not implement or abide by them. It is very disappointing that this applicant has chosen the dishonourable route and lead the community's parish up the garden path and not replicate even the screening in this document. You should reject this application as it will significantly harm the landscape, as proven at Rankins Farm, and all the eco benefits that should coexist with it. This would perhaps force them to implement our agreed screening plan, and if proven worthy, they can reapply with a proper screening plan, as they've already signed up to, but not implemented with us. And so perhaps with a proper screening plan, they can demonstrate that they can in fact screen, which they've failed to do, and perhaps then they might even have our support. I move that you reject this simply on the basis whatever screening you think will happen will not.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Heaton.
Hunton Parish Council have concerns over this application. Firstly, believe the proposal is contrary to NBC Local Plan Policy DM 36.1 brackets 2 from 2017, which is retained in the latest revision, which includes a provision for the rotational covering and uncovering of polytunnels, not all year round provision, and policy 36.2 brackets 3, which requires field margins to be enhanced, not destroyed. Secondly, Hunton Parish Council is concerned about the construction of an attenuation pond within the functional floodplain denoted Zone 3B as defined by the mapping in NBC's own surface water management and strategic flood assessment documents. Noting the several comments by KCC Drainage and also from our own flood warden, it is still unclear how an open permeable pond in Zone 3B that will be inundated filled by floodwaters during riverbelt peak flooding will be able to hold and attenuate further rainfall runoff from polytunnels during a rainstorm without passing that water directly into the functional floodplain and thus increasing the flood risk level to riverside properties in Hunton and downstream. Thirdly, Linton Growers suggests that a section of concrete road on the exit from the field will deal with mud on vehicle tyres, yet no method as to how that mud will be removed from the tyres is documented, whether this be by manual action or by metal griddle or hosing. This needs to be more formally stated and conditioned because the current hardcover stoned exit does not stop frequent mud being trailed out onto Redwall Lane. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be quite brief on this one because I think my predecessors have made a good case. In terms of runoff, I'm a trustee at a nature reserve, and we have a pond which stays dry throughout the season, and it adds so little to the biodiversity compared to how it could be if we were to manage that pond better or if we were to have developed it better. Now, this scheme is an all-round covered scheme. The case has been put forward for that not to be the case. If this does go ahead, we're covered throughout the year. Clearly, in the winter months, we're going to have a lot more problems with water management. And while I noticed that the applicant may find it unreasonable to look to keep this pond filled throughout the year, I think there could be some level of compromise here. part of our nature reserve, we have ephemeral ponds which only occur during the winter months, and they dry out in the summer months. So I think if we were to look to not necessarily tell the applicant that they have to make sure this pond is filled with water throughout the year, but if they were to make steps for it to actually hold water during the seasons where it's favourable to do so, I think that we can get a significant benefit on this site. But I do want you to consider that, because we're giving away a lot by making this as proposed with a cover throughout the year, and we have to question whether or not that's reasonable. In terms of landscaping, I hope that you may take on board the comments that have been made by Linton Parish Council, and perhaps that scheme would have to come forward in coordination with the parish to ensure that we do get the sort of cover that we're expecting with this scheme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Cover the applicant, Miss Watts.
Good evening, members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. This application seeks planning permission to provide polytunnels for the applicant's existing soft fruit propagation business, alongside associated drainage and agricultural infrastructure, which has been carefully designed in conjunction with KCC Drainage and the Environment Agency. As many of you will know, Linton Growing at Burford Farm is one of only 5 Driscoll's trusted growers as part of their international nursery network. Burford Farm is sustainably situated to serve the existing Driscoll's business at Wares Farm to the east along Redwell Lane, as well as Clockhouse Farm, sites for the onward soft fruit growth. Consequently, soft fruit growth and the use of polytunnels is also a well-established feature within the landscape. The site's existing situation in relation to the adjacent infrastructure, as well as the site's aspect, topography, irrigation system and investment in state-of-the-art growing platform means it is ideally suited for propagation. The polytunnels proposed seek to further improve plant health and provide crop protection. British propagation of soft fruit negates the need to import young fruit plants, reducing carbon footprint and the risk of new diseases. We observe that the Council's agricultural consultants recognise the importance of this and the agricultural justification for the proposal. Considering any perceived landscape and visual harm derived as a result of the proposal, a landscape and visual appraisal was submitted and also reviewed independently by suitably qualified landscape architects following the Landscape Institute's guidelines. This report and the independent review consider that there are no landscape or visual reasons why planning permission should not be granted. Indeed, the Council also consider that the proposal accords with the relevant policies and would not cause significant harm to the intrinsic character and appearance of the countryside thereabouts. Importantly, we also observe that Natural England, KCC Ecology, Highways and Drainage Department specialists, as well as the Environment Agency, do not object to the proposal. The scheme before you will deliver biodiversity enhancements, ensure effective drainage, and will improve upon mud collection before any departing vehicles join the highway network. You are no doubt aware that the government is supportive of agricultural innovation, particularly for horticulture. The National Planning Practice Guidance specifically emphasises the important role polytunnels provide to support the protection for plants, improve quality, and provide a greater opportunity for homegrown produce and sustainable food delivery. We agree and are pleased with your planning department's conclusion that the proposal would meet local and national planning policy and would not cause any harm to the countryside, residential amenities or flood risk, and would be inherently sustainable. Respectfully, we hope that members are able to share the conclusion drawn by your planning department in recommending this application for approval. Thank you for your time.